Hey everyone, Evan Dammarell here, and while my co-host Chris Manning is away, I'll be joined by Gyro Step host Ti Windisch to break down the Cavaliers' loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. Before we get started, thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
As always, our entry music for Locked On Cavs is brought to you by our friends at Astral Radio, and this show, as always, is produced by the great Jake Stevens. But you know what? Speaking of great, today's guest is Ti Windisch, a regular on the show. Ti, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great after the Milwaukee Bucks, the shorthanded Bucks versus the shorthanded Cavs. I'll give you that credit, but Cleveland survived these star guards who looked pretty unbeatable early in that game. The Bucks hold on and pull out kind of an unlikely win with some unlikely heroes, but even more great, Evan, that I'm getting to talk to you on this fine Thursday morning.
Well, flattery gets you everywhere on this show, and let me ask you this, Ti. It's just, do you think the Cavs it would have been a different ball game if there was Drew, if there was Chris, if there was even Pat out there? Or do you think it would have been similar results?
I think it would have been a little different. I mean, the Bucks obviously, end up winning and not cruising to a win. The Cavs make it close in the fourth quarter, but I think, the biggest, it's hard to say it would have been too different, because my biggest, I guess, bummer going into this, I mean, obviously would love Chris Middleton, Pat Connaughton, all those guys back, but I think Drew Holiday not playing after being questionable heading in, I was pretty worried about those two guards, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, because Javon Carter is a great guard defender, and I think although his size cost him a little bit against, I don't know if it was Karis LeVert or Mitchell at one point, like in the paint, he hangs with those guys really well. So felt good about Javon. But then having Drew and Javon as the starters, as the Bucks have done when they're healthy, that gives the Bucks a pretty unique pair of guards defensively to throw at those two guys. So I knew without Drew, Marjon Beauchamp was going to have to step up. He had a rough night offensively, but did have some nice moments on defense on the glass. But overall, I think the Bucks' physicality kind of wore those guys down a little bit without Dean Wade, without Jared Allen for the Cavs side. So, I really hope, I know these two teams play in a couple of weeks. I really hope the injury report is like just Joe Ingles and Ricky Rubio. And no slight to those guys, but we know they're going to be out for a while longer. I would love to see these two teams play at full strength, because I think on the flip side, Jared Allen obviously makes a huge difference down low for Cleveland. And despite that, Giannis still doesn't really get going, which is interesting. But yeah, I think Milwaukee's offense, there's times with some of these lineups that Bud rolls out there, they just stall out, because it's like George Hill, Jordan Nwora, Bobby Portis, Sandro Mamukelashvili is playing in this game. So I think we'd probably avoid some short outs, but Jordan Nwora really played the best game of his career. So that kind of helped make up for the losses in a big way. Yeah,
I was looking at Jordan Nwora and I'm like, man, the Bucks are good at generating some top-level talent, because you have Sam Merrill and Mamadi Diakite now with the Cleveland Charge, so there's a little bit of a common thread there. But I agree with you on your Jared Allen take for sure. I think that it was just evident in terms of the rebounding battle. I think Cleveland was out-rebounded. I don't have the stat 100% in front of me, but it was quite the margin at the end of the day. So it's tough, and like you said, Giannis wasn't really able to get it going until the third quarter, where he once again showed that he is the best third quarter scorer in the league up to this point, and definitely just imposed his will, even though he had 16 points, 12 rebounds, 8 assists. Like, they felt like they were back-breaking points in the third quarter because he ended up scoring.
I think he had 10. I think he was
10,
perfect 10 4 with 10,
Yeah, so there you go. Like, it's that, and like you said, having Jared Allen isn't going to change the fact that Brook Lopez was just a howitzer from three-point range last night, and I think just that little bit of just spacing that Lopez provided had to pull Evan Mobley out of the paint, and then in turn it also made things a little bit easier from walking on the interior. So it's just, I agree with you. I wonder what this matchup would look like if both teams were fully healthy. And I know Jared Allen and, like you said, Dean Wade is definitely a big key factor in this as well, just because it's 3-point shooting, it's size, it's a lot of things. Just that the Cavs were lacking there, 12-28 from 3-point range. I mean, only 4 less 3-pointers made than Milwaukee at the end of the day. But you're starting Lamar Stevens, who, even though he went 2-3, isn't the best 3-point shooter. You're giving Isaac Okoro some serious burn. He got 25 minutes. He didn't attempt a single 3 last night. Kevin Love is your only shooter off the bench, and he was 1 of 3 from 3. So adding that Dean Wade wrinkle, especially when Cedi Osman's just kind of been so inconsistent as of late, is really huge for the Cavs. And I think like you said, they play each other in a few weeks, I believe, not a few weeks, 2 weeks time, and they're back in Milwaukee. And I wonder if this Cavs team is more healthy. Because, like you said, there's going to be no Ricky Rubio. Dylan Windler won't play either because the team said, and I should have mentioned this at the top, the team announced he'll be out the next 4 to 6 weeks after getting a PRP shot in his ankle. So, at this point, maybe you just see some Jared Allen out there and you see the Cavs look a little bit more full strength. And I agree with you. Like, the Drew Holiday aspect, he put Darius Garland in hell last time they played each other in Milwaukee. And then Javon Carter, who I love a lot, and especially this fit with this Bucks team because he just fits what they do defensively. Like, that's a really fun pairing to put against Garland and Mitchell. And I think Chris Middleton's just very underrated. And I think if he was there, he probably would have been able to exploit some of Cleveland's lax perimeter defense. And also just the fact that Karis LeVert is kind of getting shredded as the starting 3 for the Cavs right now defensively. And post-game, JB Bickerstaff kind of hinted at a lineup change. And me thinks that it might be LeVert going to the bench and somebody else coming into the starting lineup. Probably Dean Wade when he's healthy, but maybe Lamar Stevens until that happens.
Yeah, I thought it was good for Stevens that he was able to knock down a couple of threes. Basically drew the Giannis Romer assignment, which this is why I think that the Bucks were able to win, and by fairly convincingly. And the rebounding margin was 34 boards for the Cavs and 52 for the Bucks. So that's dramatic. Like that's a big deal. And I think the Cavs aren't small. Obviously, they're much bigger with Allen, but I think you do look at this game and it's like, if Dean Wade were able to come in and really, really space the floor. And I think the other thing, too, about Allen not being out there is it made life a lot harder for Kevin Love, who really, unable to look comfortable defensively. And then I think that kind of translated to the offensive side. He's a guy who I always worry about playing because I know, he's comfortable. There's some power forwards and stretchy big guys where it's like, they're not going to shoot that many times. The Bucks had made this gambit against Al Horford before and won, right? Like Al Horford doesn't want to take 15 threes. I think if Kevin Love had 15 threes that look good and he's in a rhythm, like he's taking all of them. So not a guy not a guy I look forward to facing, but but the Bucks held him in check. But I think the spacing was just a concern for Cleveland here, and it really let Milwaukee's bigs be comfortable. The Bucks get to play big. Karis is 0 for 2. Again, Lamar Stevens, the guy who I didn't expect, who really came through and made Giannis pay for leaving him in the corners, saying 2 of his 3, but Mobley doesn't attempt a 3. He spent a lot of time down low. Mitchell and Garland were 8 for 18. That's pretty good, but outside of those 2 guys and then Lamar Stevens, nobody hurt them from deep. Okoro doesn't take one. Cedi Osman, obviously Robin Lopez, not a shooter, and Kevin Love only makes the 1. So I think that allowed Milwaukee to really compress, and the new Bucks defense, right, of we're not going to give you wide open threes anywhere, and we're not going to give you the rim either. It does make it hard for teams. So especially teams that, don't have lineups that are prone to bombing away outside of, again, the 2 guys here for Cleveland. I just think the Bucks then get very comfortable on defense. And that's what that second half and that third quarter, I think Mitchell was like 0 for 6. He had a tough second half in this game, but that I think really made the difference. And then Milwaukee gets running, and that really bandages over the offense that's hurting without Holiday, Middleton, Connaughton, all of those guys, and Grayson Allen as well.
Yeah, Donovan Mitchell was 0 for 6 in the third quarter alone, 0 for 3 from 3, and then he was 1 for 4, he was 1 for 3, through 1 of 1 from 3-point range in the fourth quarter. So, Donovan Mitchell came out red hot like he kind of does for the Cavs, and then he really petered off a little bit. You wonder if maybe the knee injury is still impacting him a little bit there, but I think, like you said, the Bucks' new defensive scheme, where it's not so drop coverage heavy, where in the past, the Cavs in general like to tempt fate with Mike Budenholzer teams and say, like, okay, if you want us to take threes, we'll take a bunch of them. But I think the Cavs other than Mitchell and Garland, are missing some of their shooters. And like you said, Lamar Stevens going 2 or 3 from three is just trying to keep the defenses on, at least Milwaukee's defense honest, but that's just not something you really expect from him as a shooter in general. But hey, you'll take it when you can get it. But let's put a pin in this conversation real quick. I want to talk more about Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, just kind of you as an onlooker from afar of just how you feel about this team. And we'll break down more about this game too, just because this is the first taste Cleveland and Milwaukee have had of each other. But let me give everyone our word from today's first sponsor, BetterHelp. Man, I wish life and navigating a podcast came with a user manual. It would make some of my daily mental struggles so much easier. That's why I'm glad I have today's sponsor, BetterHelp. When it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. Navigating any of life's challenges can make you feel unsure, whether it's a career change, a new relationship, hosting a podcast, or becoming a parent. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million users with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere and is 100% online. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. It couldn't be any simpler. There's no waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. And if you're interested, you can learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, and go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only available that Locked On itself can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So, Ty, let's just pick up right where we left off. When you look at how the Cavs acquired Donovan, let's talk about that first. The Cavs acquired Donovan Mitchell. How did you feel about them before the acquisition and then after they got them? Because in my opinion and Chris's opinion as well, we thought they were like a fringe playoff playing team before Donovan Mitchell, and now that they have Donovan Mitchell, after seeing a few games of it, we're like, okay, they could probably be gunning for a top 4, maybe top 3 record in the East, and then we'll just see where the chips fall because this team's never made the playoffs before.
Yeah, I think I probably had them just scrapping above the play-in, and I know that it sounds worse than I think it is just because the East this year is so deep, and I think now knowing what we know now about some of these other teams, like, Philly off to a slow start, Miami looking a little taxed, and then the Nets imploding a little earlier than usual this season. I think probably they're sneaking. They're 5 or 6 without the trade at this point, but I think they should be looking top 4 with this version of the team. If, and I think the big question about the early season Cavs, outside of can they get healthy, which it seems like is everyone right now in the league, unfortunately, is this like crazy locked in version of Donovan Mitchell. Is that sustainable for the full season? And obviously he's not going to average 40, whatever. I mean, he's had some crazy games, but really like locked in and the guy and totally engaged on defense and doing good work there and all of that. Like, that's my big question for the Cavs is, is that just going to keep going? I really like Garland. I think getting someone a little bit better than him offensively is like a really good thing for Darius Garland, because I think, even the biggest Garland optimists, I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think we're seeing like Steph Curry, right? Like, I don't think it's just really hard as a point guard.
Well, it's an unfair comparison. It is.
It totally is. And that guy keeps getting better every year. And somehow they're still losing games over there. But it's like, I just think having that other star player is good for Garland, takes a lot of pressure off. I mean, literally, it was almost like a poetic that his back was hurting last year because he was doing so much lifting on offense for the Cavs. Now I think bringing in Mitchell is really good for him and for this team's offense. I mean, you look at the teams that you basically were 3 players you could get for a whole lot of draft picks over the summer. And I got to feel like you're feeling pretty good as the Cavs with the guy you came up with. I think DeJounte Murray looks great in Atlanta, but I don't think you're kicking yourself. I think you're fine not getting Rudy Gobert with the way things are starting with the Timberwolves. Obviously, with the personnel already here as well.
Yeah.
That one didn't make much sense. But, yeah, I think after the acquisition, I figured I do think this core not making the playoffs is probably the biggest thing held against them at this point outside of the wings. So they still – I think Dean Wade has come along. I know we got the 10 things nod from Zach Lowe, and I am intrigued. I really do hope he plays the next time they play the Bucks. Maybe he is just enough of an answer. Maybe they can still get a little funky at the trade deadline. Who knows? But I think a little bit more depth, especially at the wing, could change my outlook for them this year. But I do think right now, if they're able to get healthy, like this should be a team that is winning a playoff series. That would be my expectation. I think it's going to be hard for them against Boston, Milwaukee, but I think they should be pretty scrappy with everybody else, including the Sixers, who I'm just like not sold on. And I think I don't know if I would favor the Cavs, but I do think the Cavs should have a chance in that series.
Do you think the Cavs have the mental toughness to beat James Harden and Joel Embiid and Doc Rivers?
I'm going to say a yes. Well, maybe we won't see Doc. That might be the swing. That might be the swing of the series if we don't see Doc by then.
Friend of the program, Jordan Christmas, pretty well, and I remind him every now and then. Man, the Sixers could have had Ty Lue. He was right there. The ink was almost dry on the contract, and Doc Rivers swooped in and just ruined everything. And he's like, dude, don't remind me. Every time. But I agree with you. I think the Donovan Mitchell addition, I was pretty high on to begin with. I think the Cavs just being able to play either him and Garland together or they stagger the two of them. You're seeing a lot of it being effective, especially just like letting Mitchell cook. When Garland went down with that eye injury during the season over, like if that happened last season, the Cavs probably would have fell apart at the seams and be towards the bottom of the East and trying to scrap their way back into the conversation at the top of the conference. But with the addition of Mitchell, it adds a level of calm to it, and I've written about it, and I've asked JP Bickerstaff about it. Like, yeah, they've taken a lot of examples of what worked in Utah, and like you said, just from a Milwaukee aspect, if Dean Wade was available, maybe Cedi Osman is a little bit more comfortable as a shooter. If Kevin Love is feeling more comfortable with some wide open looks, the Cavs have found a lot of effective play and just running a lot of spread pick and roll with Donovan Mitchell, and I think they should try some of that with Darius Garland too, where you just have a rolling big man, whether it's Jared Allen or Evan Mobley, who was actually setting some pretty hard screens against the Bucks to start the game last night, which is encouraging because he's not the hardest screener out there. But it's a formula for success, and I think the Cavs just kind of, these injuries just at some surprisingly key spots for them, like Dean Wade, which is weird to think is a key player for this Cavs rotation-wise, just as in terms of a shooter. Like it limits the upside of this team. But yeah, I think if they're healthy, their basement is a second round ceiling, and I can maybe see them scrapping their way into the Eastern Conference Finals if they like draw the right opponent. Let's say Milwaukee and Boston, or just it turns into a bloodbath in the second round between those two somehow, and then the Cavs just kind of get like Philly or Miami or something. Like I feel good about their chances. Maybe not so much against Miami because Eric Spoelstra is just a tactical genius, and I think we'll press the right buttons to make the Cavs uncomfortable on a big stage like that. But I could see them reaching the East Finals, but then I just don't know if they can get past Milwaukee or if they can get past Boston. And if they do, great. Like that, this is pie in the sky scenario for the Cavs because they're playing with house money at that point. But yeah, it's certainly a power shift. And like you said, there weren't a lot of players available. And I think just cashing in most of your key assets to go get a guy like Donovan Mitchell to kind of push this Cavs team and maybe help them level up in real time is going to help quite a bit. But we'll see what happens. I'm intrigued to see what Evan Mobley evolves into. I know on the Chase Down you said, is Chris Bosh too low of a bar for him?
Yeah, we got to get into that. We got to unpack that.
We'll unpack that. We'll unpack Evan Mobley in the third segment because I'm curious about his trajectory. Just as a Giannis observer, if Mobley has that kind of potential in him a little bit. But
I'll hold an L real quick. I did say this preseason, I'm going to hold myself accountable.
Okay.
I did wonder, would they regret trading all the stuff and Sexton for Mitchell? Like, what's the difference between those two players was the question I asked. So far, the difference has been pretty astronomical. So
yeah,
I don't think
shooting
that's a concern.
Wins.
Yeah.
It's
so, I'm still a Colin Sexton truther. But I'm gonna drop that take. I didn't want to skirt the the grind here. I'll take the hate. I deserve it. It's a bad question to be asked, but
You're all good,
Mitchell has answered that one pretty definitively, I think.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think it's an interesting situation because, yeah, Colin Sexton's balling out in Utah. And I think just him having success despite the knee injury and what was probably more serious than what we were led on to be is just great for him. But I think the Cavs 10 times out of 10 will do this trade over again because Donovan Mitchell's just unlocked so much for them on so many different ways. And it's just, we'll see where it goes from here because, again, this is a young team who has never made the playoffs with it before they got Donovan Mitchell, and they still haven't clearly with Donovan Mitchell now in tow. So we'll see what happens. And it's exciting, though. Like, I think it's fun that two non-glamour market teams like Milwaukee and Cleveland could be kind of shaping the future of the Eastern Conference for years to come.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I heard this concept about the Mavs, but everyone is looking for their Drew Holiday trade now. And I'm not expecting them to go win the title right after getting Mitchell like the Bucks did with Holiday. But I think there is that idea of like you can kind of build a core. And instead of just, I think the traditional method, right, the NFL method, this is how NFL teams operate. It's like, oh, we're good enough. Like we're going to stand pat for a few years, right? We're going to see what these guys turn into and everything else. The new method is like, no, like let's go above and beyond. We've got all these draft picks. We're going to be good anyway. Like let's make ourselves really good now. And let's not play what if. Let's not, try to open up cap space or whatever else. Let's just get a bunch of talent and figure it out. I think that's a good approach. It clearly worked for the Bucks, and I think it looks like it's really working right now for Cleveland and for Atlanta. Minnesota, TBD on Minnesota.
TBD. We'll save the Karl Anthony Towns, the chatter for after the show if you want to, but let's put another pin in this conversation. We're going to talk about Evan Mobley after the next break. But first, let me give you a quick word from today's other sponsor, SweatBlock. Christopher, and I don't mean my co-host, even though he's in Disney, wore a sweater every day to school, even in the hot Texas summers, to try and hide his disgusting, sweaty body. Thanks to today's sponsor, SweatBlock, he can now wear any shirt with confidence, dry as a bone. SweatBlock light wipes were invented by a doctor, then they're guaranteed to work, or you don't. They call it the SweatBlock Dry Shirt Guarantee, and if SweatBlock doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweater odor, try SweatBlock risk-free today. Save 20% with promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. They're also available on Amazon. All right, we're back with the last segment on today's Locked On Cavs. Ty, let's just pick it right back up. Evan Mobley, you think Chris Bosh is a bar too low?
I mean, realistically, it shouldn't be, right? I think the issue is he is starting faster than Bosh, and certainly than Giannis too. But I think that sometimes that gets extrapolated in a way that is just not correct. Like I think, as a Bucks fan, and it's not the same at all because he was so much older, but it kind of reminds me of like Malcolm Brogdon came in and was like really good, and it's like, oh my goodness, what is he going to be? She's going to be pretty much that. Unfortunately, a little less healthy, and always rooting for Brogdon to stay healthy. And again, Mobley's much younger. I think he will develop more than a Malcolm Brogdon, but it's just hard to say exactly how or exactly how much. But I do think the Bosh name is invoked because of just how fluid and smooth he is. And obviously, Bosh became a really knockdown three-point shooter. That would be a massive development for Mobley. I don't think he has to go that way. I think he could handle the ball more out of the post. I thought his post game against the Bucks, like drilling looks over Brook Lopez, which is very hard to do, really impressed me. Just the way he moves, especially defensively, right? I mean, the way he guards on the perimeter, I think is something we haven't seen much at all. That's even more than Bosh, I think, on the perimeter defense. But just it's almost like a defensive Bosh, and then what's the offense going to be? So I can't wait to see. I have no strong opinion on exactly how he's going to develop or what his game is going to look like, but I do think the ceiling is very high because of just how fluid he is and how comfortable he looks already, despite it being like, not like it's a bad fit team for him, but it is a team where it's not like he's getting to do a ton on offense, which is probably good, but he just looks comfortable and useful out there already.
Yeah, and we talk about this a lot on the show, just between Chris and I, because we have listeners ask all the time, like, hey, Like the other night against the Timberwolves, Evan Mobley only took 4 buckets or took 4 shot attempts. And yeah, maybe you're a little concerned, but I wrote about this at Fear the Sore as well, where your offensive engine begins and ends with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and those two are going to be soaking up a ton of your shots. And then you obviously have to feed Mobley and Allen, but the problem is Rudy Gobert had a pretty good night for the Timberwolves the other night and kind of contained Evan Mobley, had him in foul trouble on both ends of the floor. And it's a little interesting because then you watch him come out against the Bucks. There's maybe a little bit of quiet concerns because he's been a little bit inconsistent offensively, and maybe, like you said, he isn't quite ready to take that leap. And the added luxury of that is there's no pressure for him to take that leap quite yet because the Cavs went out and got Donovan Mitchell, so they have Mitchell and Garland just kind of playing in harmony with, well, at least attempting harmony with one another right now, just to try and find that comfortability and familiarity with one another. But the defensive stuff, I 100% agree with. Like, it's bonkers how good he is defensively. Like, he had a couple clutch blocks down the stretch against Milwaukee. He's really good at defending without fouling. And again, like, it's crazy for me to share this stat, but he is only allowing 4 isolation buckets on 26 isolation possessions so far. And you don't see a lot of big guys do that, especially guys that are only in their second year in the league. So he's comfortable defending in space. Like, and he takes a lot of pride in that challenge. And I agree. Like, the offensive upside with Bosch, like, became like a knockdown 3-point shooter. Hell, even Brook Lopez too. Like, a guy who completely reinvented his game. He became a shooter after being a back to the basket scorer. I'm saying Mobley's like that, but he was asked about it the other day, like, hey, you were typing up in the preseason, like, I want to facilitate more on the offensive end, I want to shoot more 3-pointers, like, and you haven't shot a ton of threes yet, you're usually shooting like 1 or 2 a game at most. And he's just like, it is what it is. He's like, I'd rather do more to help the team win, and eventually the 3-pointers will fall, and when I get more comfortable out there. And yeah, I think that's the right approach to have. And like you said, maybe he's not going to have the most eye-popping stat nights where like it's 20, 15 and a couple assists, a couple steals, a couple blocks. Maybe it's going to be, for now, 15, 12, a couple steals, a couple blocks, a couple assists, because he's just so involved in every single aspect of the game, and you can see the potential. And I'm curious to see does he take the Giannis route and just like absolutely bulk up like crazy and just become like a defensive juggernaut and kind of abandon maybe becoming like a reliable 3-point shooter, but it's still part of his bag at the end of the day? Or does he kind of maintain this svelte-ish frame but become more Bosch-ish? Because Mobley's just, his potential is just boggling to me. Yeah. And it's crazy to watch him evolve like that. And I don't know, man. He tightens up the handle, and maybe if he becomes a little bit more of a shooter, but like the Cavs were calling his number in the mid-range against Milwaukee a few times last night. They're like, okay, give the ball to Evan. He's going to try and drive to the basket, then pull up in the mid-range. And like, you don't really have your big guys doing that, but Mobley looks comfortable enough doing that make or miss. At least you're empowering him to kind of do this stuff, to maybe find out like, okay, this is kind of not working, and we need to go back to the drawing board and tweak it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm wondering, the interesting thing is it looks like, and obviously he's so young and could go so many different directions. Yeah. But it looks like that like mid-post area of his game is kind of coming along, even if he's not traditionally posting up. So I almost wonder, is that the next evolution? It's becoming a little more comfortable creating shots, and really, if he's going to be playing out there with Jared Allen, can you exploit the mismatches of most teams not playing big enough to cover both of those guys with bigs? And does he get comfortable enough to really work more out of the post and create his own shot there, create more for others there, and become kind of a hub of offense up there? Not to compare them an overall skill set, but kind of the way Jokic operates for Denver. Yeah. And then can you get those guards operating off of him more like satellites? I think that could be really funky and interesting. And so I do think there's a way. I think same with Giannis. Like, sometimes people are just like all or nothing on the 3-point shot. I don't think that's the case with Evan Mobley. I do think, for them as currently ish constructed to win a championship, it's likely that he'd need to develop more on the offensive end, because I do think you're probably going to need a little bit more help there. And him shooting more would help a lot, just with, the other side of the floor, the front court pairing of Mobley, or that side of the floor, I should say, front court pairing of Mobley and Allen. But he's fascinating. He's fascinating. He's really good already. So, it takes some of the concern out, I think.
No, I absolutely agree. I think the acquisition, again, of Donovan Mitchell just kind of mitigates the concern for Mobley to become a shooter right away this season. And maybe like Dean Wade being a little funky, and if he's the starting three for the Cavs, like he knows what his role is, which is he's the fifth banana in the starting lineup, and he'll consistently be open for 3-point attempts when the Cavs run a lot of just spread pick and roll stuff. And I think that's something the Cavs should explore, and I agree with you, where maybe you have Mobley act as an offensive hub at the top of the key, similar to a Jokic, where you have Garland and Mitchell both playing off ball of one another, and Mobley's just kind of reading the offense. And like you see it sometimes, there's a lot of big-to-big passing where it's something that's kind of evolved organically over time, but like JB Bickerstaff's been a big proponent of it, and Jared Allen said like JB has been pushing them on it, where like either Mobley or Allen will be streaking towards the basket, and the other one will be standing at the top of the 3-point line. We'll just throw a quick lob to the other one. And like, there's ways to make it functional between those two. And like you said, there's a lot of mismatches Cleveland can exploit. And to circle back to the beginning of the conversation, I wonder if there's ways the Cavs can kind of press some of Milwaukee's buttons a little bit, because they have 2 7-footers out there, and one that is very dynamic on both ends in Evan Mobley, and then also Jared Allen, who's maybe obviously not as dynamic offensively, but super consistent and just a huge defensive threat as well, because he's just so good at defending the rim. So I don't know. I'm curious to see, because it is similar to a playoff style matchup between the Bucks and the Cavs. Like, granted, there's a couple games in between, but like they're playing each other pretty closely, and they have film on one another on what was and wasn't working. So I do wonder what adjustments Milwaukee will make to kind of maybe make life easier for them against Cleveland. And if you're Cleveland, I wonder what adjustments and hopefully what health you have heading into this next matchup, because this is kind of a sour note. Like, you beat Boston twice in overtime, and now you're going up against the best team in the Eastern Conference, or the NBA in general, and you kind of laid an egg out there. So I'm curious to see what happens, and I do wonder, to circle back to this segment, how much is Evan Mobley going to be involved, because he looked really comfortable on both ends of the floor last night against Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I do think that that mid-range area is, the narrative right now is that the Bucks just aren't giving up good looks anywhere, and it's sort of true, but I do think what they're conceding the most is the middies, and they're like rear contests from those guards and those perimeter defenders, but those are still the shots they're giving up. If you watch the way the Hawks beat the Bucks, I mean, the offense for Milwaukee was just stuck in the mud, and Jordan Ward doesn't show up with a career best night, and Brook Lopez doesn't shoot 7 for 9 from 3. So it's just tough for them without Drew, without Chris to score enough. But I think on the offensive end, Atlanta was getting into that mid-range area and doing work there. And it did seem like Mobley was able to tap into that all night long. And definitely, I think the Cavs can lean into some Bucks stuff, especially defensively, being able to have it's the same principle at the end of the day, is you got your true big at the rim, and then you have your other big who's good enough to be on the perimeter, but also help on the paint. I think both Cavs and Bucks fans now are well aware of how devastating that can be as a defensive tandem. The tricky thing for the Cavs, I think, is going to be the offensive end, because for the Bucks, it works because Lopez has become that spacing threat. And I do think that's going to be, outside of just inexperience, their biggest playoff challenge for the Cavs is, when spacing gets really tight, when teams really adjust, which the Bucks don't do much night to night in the regular season, how are we going to make enough room? I think there's going to need some magic from Garland and Mitchell, which, those guys do some pretty impressive stuff. So maybe it'll be there, who knows? But I think that's going to be probably their biggest first bugaboo, as the Bucks would see, rampaging through a regular season. And then you've got Bledsoe and Giannis and Lopez, who shoots well but is not a knockdown all the time. And teams were just able to settle up and really just make life too hard for them offensively. So definitely some fun parallels between these two teams.
Yeah, there are a lot of fun parallels, and we'll have to have you on again to talk about it when they play each other later this month. Maybe Chris will be there, and he won't be off enjoying sunny Florida instead of the freezing pre-thunderstorm area thunder snowstorm area that is Cleveland, Ohio. But Ty, that's going to do it for us today. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you? Tell everyone about GSPN. Tell them about Talk of the Tundra. Tell them about everything you got going on the BlueWire side of things.
Yeah, we're all over the place. So got Gyro Step Podcast Network, GSPN, covering Wisconsin sports. So Gyro Step and Winning 6 on the Milwaukee Bucks. And then we have Milwaukee Brewers, Packers, and a pop culture podcast covered as well. Hoping to do a Pokemon pod soon if that strikes your fancy. But you can find Twitter, links, everything at gspn.info. So appreciate anyone who would like to check that out.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Ty, for having us. I think you have surpassed Justin Rowan once again as the most visited guest on this show.
Let's go.
We'll keep that streak alive, hopefully, in a few more days' time. But everyone, check out Ty, check out the Gyro Step, check out GSPN, check out that Pokemon pod, because Pokemon Scarlet and Violet come out tomorrow, believe it or not. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen. If you're listening to us on audio, check us out on YouTube and give us a subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, I can guarantee you're actually not subscribed to us, even though you think you are. So just go ahead and hit that button and click that bell so you know when every episode goes live. And until next time, I'm Evan. There's no Chris. See you next time.